right, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Mitch Joel, author of 6 Pixels of Separation, amongst many other things. Thanks for being with me here today, Mitch.
Thanks for having me, Jared. How are things out on the West Coast?
Yeah, things are great here in Vancouver. Just was actually skiing this morning already, and so it's been a good day for me. How about you?
Well, I live in Montreal, so skiing is part of the joie de vivre here, but it's not great. We're in a pretty heavy lockdown here. We're in a situation now where no stores are open except for supermarkets and pharmacies. You got to be home by 8 p.m., can't leave until 5 a.m.
Wow.
But on the plus side, for me at least, most people don't agree with this. I'm just happy that the kids are in school. If the kids weren't in school, it would be, I mean, we might see a show soon and bashing through that door. We'll find out, yeah.
I mean, I'm with you. I've got little kids, and that is absolutely the most important thing right now for us.
Stay in school, yeah.
I'm in school. Absolutely. So, Mitch, maybe we'll just start off with just tell us about yourself. Like, you're a world-renowned marketer. I would love to hear just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Great question. So I started off my career in the late 80s in music journalism. My first job was actually interviewing Tommy Lee from Motley Crue.
Wow.
And I thought I was going to be a musician / journalist. Quickly discovered that I wanted to own magazines, and I started publishing some music magazines and cultural magazines, both in Quebec and in the rest of Canada. And then through that process, I wound up doing a lot of freelance writing. Tangentially, at the same time, the internet was coming into being, and I'd always been very nerdy with computers and video game systems and stuff like that. And I started putting these articles on what was the internet back then, and I often tell people that one of the cover stories in one of the magazines I had called Enrage was on the net. I think it was in about 92.
Oh, wow.
And the innovation at the time was hyperlinks. Just to show you how early in the game it was, like this great, you could click on a word and it would take you to a web page in a world where you had to know the actual URL for every single page prior to that.
Right.
And so I published these magazines and did some online stuff in parallel at the same time. Then I wound up editing a magazine locally here in Montreal that was supporting entrepreneurs and getting young people encouraged to stay in the province in a world where we have issues with language and stuff like that. And I met these individuals who had launched a search engine. Now, again, we say, Google, I get it. But this was before Google existed.
Yeah.
And it was a meta search engine. And we built out a lot of the sales models that you currently see in places like Facebook and Google. And then from there, I went through the whole .com boom, bust, and echo, the first one, and then helped launch a mobile content business here. And again, back then, mobile content, there wasn't smartphones. There wasn't even a mobile web browser at the time. In fact, there wasn't even interoperability for SMS between carriers. Wow. So you could only send a text message if your friend was on Rogers or Bell or Telus or whatever. It's crazy. So very early was what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I then decided I was going to go back into the music business, and I launched a record label, which was starting to do well. But at that point, I had met a handful of partners. We were actually 4 partners in the end to be a part of this thing called Twist Image, which was starting in about 2000, one of the earlier digital marketing agencies. We built that over the course of many years. In fact, up until 6 years ago, when I sold the agency to WPP, which is the largest marketing communications advertising network in the world. And that agency became something that exists now called Mirum, which is about 3,000 employees in 30 countries.
Wow.
And in building the agency, early days, 2004-ish, I started blogging at this place called 6 Pixels of Separation. I started podcasting in about 2006. And to this day, it still goes on. The podcast, I think, is the longest running business podcast in the world.
Wow.
And I started speaking and I started writing books, 6 Pixels of Separation being my first, Control Delete was my second. And I had this platform happening around social channels and creating blogs and podcasts and social media content. And when I left the agency business about 2 years ago, I took the brand. They were kind enough to give it to me because they bought it, 6 Pixels of Separation, with me. And I do a lot of media appearances now. I do a lot of investing and advising, and I'm sort of tinkering around with an idea for a new startup.
Wow, fabulous.
Sorry, it's a long story. It's not easy to just...
I remember in 6 Pixels of Separation, you talk about like as a guy who's passionate about music and working in the music industry. One of the first websites maybe you came across was, I can't remember if it was like the Motley Crue or somebody like that, and it was a website based in Arizona, and how long it took. You'd like go to work and come back, and it would load.
It was Megadeth.
Megadeth,
to this
that's right.
day, I still see the guys. In fact, one of my side gigs for fun is I'm trying to build the largest oral history of electric bass players. And so if you're into bass, there's the biggest site for bass. It's called NoTrouble.com. It's not mine. It's this guy Corey that owns it. And I do their podcast, which is every month.
Wow.
And it's been going on for about 6 years. So I just got David Ellison, who's the bass player in Megadeth, on that show. And before we were recording, I was saying, man, I remember it was even called Megadeth Arizona. And I would load the page and like go for supper and come back. And like a lot of times it still hadn't loaded. It was really ahead of its time. But yeah, if you didn't think Megadeth was an original band, they were definitely World Wide Web warriors for sure.
That's amazing. I love that. So let's dive into a little bit about social media here. So when we say social media or social media marketing, like what does that mean to you? What strikes you immediately?
It's a great question. And I think that there is a massive differentiation between social media and social media advertising. Social media, for me, is the ability for anybody, and that includes brands, to create content in text, images, audio, or video, in short form or long form, and have the ability to publish it and broadcast it to the world instantly and for free. That would be my purest definition of what social media is. What makes it social is the aspect of it having shareability and interactivity. That could be commenting, it could be likes, it could be shares, it could be people taking that article or blog post or Twitter feed and turning it into another piece of content. And I think what's happened, I'd say in the past almost 10 years, is that concept has been eroded into social media advertising, which is as millions and billions of people join these social media platforms, they become, you are the product, the user, and you suddenly become very attractive to advertisers in a world where advertisers are just looking for more and more eyeballs and attention. So when brands talk about this idea of like, we want to be engaged in social media, I'm like, are you trying to just pay your way into creating something that would be of attention to a customer? Or are you trying to build another line of storytelling in your business to engage people in a different way than perhaps traditional advertising has been able to afford you?
So how important is it for a brand, any brand, whatever it is, to add value to the followers that they might have on any given social channel?
So the answer from my peers might be vary. The answer from me is, I don't know. It depends. I'm very easygoing.
Yeah.
And people would say to me, oh, you can never sell on Facebook. I'm like, I think you can.
Right.
People would say, you shouldn't just promote yourself on Facebook. I think you can. It depends on, do people care?
Right.
So if you're a store and people love your store and they can't wait for Wednesday at 10 a.m. when you launch your new product lines or you have your new deliveries or you have a weekly sale, yeah, you can totally use Facebook as the notifier for that. That'd be great.
Sure.
People follow you and love you.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it was kind of heresy. It's like you didn't do that. Like you have to create your followers and your community and all that stuff. And I never prescribed to it really then. At a macro level, I wanted that.
Right.
I wanted businesses that were very transactional or direct response driven to think about ways they can engender their brand, to think about ways that they can tell their storytelling. Because, look, you're teaching a class right now, and if we were there physically in person, which hopefully one day we can be, I'd love to know the percentage of what the split would be from your students and even yourself, Jarrett, around what do you think a brand needs to be good? In a world of 100%, how much of that percent, I'll ask you, how much out of 100% should be brand storytelling, and how much of that 100% should be direct response, like driven advertising acquisitions? Like, what would you say is a good balance for that if you were a brand? Sure. And maybe I'm more conservative and I would say 50-50 would even be good.
Sure.
if you really look at it, it's probably 90-10, 90 direct response, 10 brand storytelling. So you have a world where they can, but they don't.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I think we could make a lot of really strong arguments on how clicks don't work and just pimping and pimping and pimping isn't the best way.
Yeah.
And yet, when you look at the brass tacks of what they're doing, it's fundamentally different than what they would say as an answer to that question.
Right.
They probably say 50-50, 70-30, something like that. But it's not even inverted. It's probably 90% 10, if 10%, if 10% even.
Yeah.
Because it's a drug.
Yeah.
It's a drug to be able to target who you want. It's a drug to be able to get their email address and constantly get. It's a drug to have that type of access. Advertisers have never had that. We, for decades, were complaining about the data drought. And suddenly we were drowning in data. And
can I just stop you there? What can you just tell me, like, what is the data drought? What does that mean?
Well, a data drought is I want to reach people. I guess I'll take an ad at 8 p.m. on NBC because everybody's watching must-see TV. I don't know who I'm speaking to. I don't know who I'm reaching. I have to go through 16 layers of intermediaries from my media agency to the media agency that represents the television broadcasters to if I'm doing it regionally or nationally. I'm paying a fortune. I have no data from that. I don't know who saw it, if anyone did or anything, to I can go on Facebook today, choose specific keywords for a specific region, for a specific gender, for whatever I want, and get exactly those types of people who like this. And I'll know exactly who saw it, who clicked on it, and then who converted. Right. Because I can actually unique tag them as well.
Right. So it's gone to the extreme.
Well, yeah. I mean, clearly it's gone to an extreme. Are brands and media companies using it with a high level of efficacy? Some are, some aren't. I mean, we see tons of issues with that for sure.
Right. Well, that's fascinating. So if I were to say that we've gone through a social media revolution or maybe even a digital marketing revolution in the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, what does that mean to you, or how would you describe that and how that's impacted marketers?
Yeah, I mean, it probably would have been a really different answer a couple of weeks ago. Now we can describe it in one word: Trump. I mean, that would be the social media revolution that is going to define the next couple months, if not years. They being a handful of private and or public companies have essentially cut the oxygen off of the most powerful human being in the world. Whether you like him or not, that's something. And whether we like it or not, in a year or two, when those tech companies are going to Washington to lobby for whatever it is, I wonder how those politicians will react to their demands in a world where they just saw them choke out the president of the United States of America. So when you talk about a social media revolution, that's what I think of. It could have been Me Too. It could have been Black Lives Matter. It could have been, you can go back through the history of social media, Arab Spring, and just see moments in times where people use this ability to connect to others as a fundamental shift in not only expressing a belief, but getting others to take part in something perhaps bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
So this isn't about whether it's right or wrong what's happening with tech and Washington today. It's more about the fact that these revolutions keep happening. And the reason they actually keep happening is because media was fundamentally, for decades and decades and decades, a business that was based on scarcity.
Right.
It was very expensive and hard and complex to deliver a message to a large audience. Social media's true revolution is changing media from a model of scarcity to one of abundance.
Right.
And with that comes all of the problems that I laid out and many more.
Yeah.
But also with that came this amazing thing where you and I would never have even met had it not been for these channels.
Absolutely. Yeah.
A world where I could never have an hour-long conversation with Whitney Johnson on my podcast and be able to share that with the world. Nobody would have broadcasted that.
Yeah.
Not because she's not brilliant and not because I'm not good at what I do, but simply because there were so many people vying for a very small set of specific time slots that were available to broadcast information.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, when you talk about this kind of revolution, the way you brought it up, like in my mind, the Arab Spring, the overthrowing of so many Middle Eastern governments during that time, it seemed to me like that was the beginning of when the world realized how much power social media had. So much so that kids in the Arab world were born and being named things like Facebook and Twitter, from what I've read at least.
Yeah.
It's quite remarkable.
I mean, it is remarkable. And look, the reason I started blogging in 2004 or 5, whenever it was, is because, well, I'll fast forward the story a little bit more to frame it better. I was doing some infrequent writing for the Harvard Business Review. And this is going back years. I had written an article on Facebook. It sounds crazy now because it's totally happening. But my comment years and years ago was that Facebook should create a currency.
Right.
That if you have billions of people connected on your platform, advertising might have been a mistake to do. They should just build a currency platform. I mean, how amazing would it be to have a unified global currency that you could transact with in a network where most people were on?
Yeah.
It would change the dynamics for a lot of new businesses and a lot of new opportunities. So I'd sent this article through to Harvard Business Review, and the response back was, sorry, you're not an economist and you're not a currency expert, and it's a nice idea, but it's not for us. And old Mitch, pre-internet, would have been like that feeling I would get constantly from editors when you would pitch an idea and they would say, we're not interested, which is just the life of a journalist and writer,
right?
To being, okay, I'll just publish it on my blog.
Yeah.
And I published it on my blog and people liked it and I shared it on LinkedIn and whatever else was around at the time. It's that power.
Yeah.
It's the power of I don't need... And we're seeing it like live out again today in a place like Substack. You're seeing a lot of journalists say like, I don't know if I need that crappy salary that you're paying me. I could maybe write on my own, build my audience and do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of those models that you're talking about that go back to naming kids after social media platforms is really what it is, which is the sense of freedom and the sense of reach, the sense of distribution. But on the other hand, we have a world where, Professor Scott Galloway likes to say we have a handful of unregulated monopolies who are controlling it. So we are seeing the result of that as well.
Yeah.
So what, I guess the question then becomes for me, what would Trump look like today? We're recording this January 15th. I don't know when you're going to publish this. If the primary way he connected to his audience was through DonaldTrump.com, text messaging and a newsletter.
Right. Yeah.
If he didn't rely on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook for his audience. And again, you can look at that and go, I remember really well in the early days of MySpace, when MySpace closed, bands were like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And I was like, what do? You should have owned your own .com.
Right.
You should have had your database. You should have been speaking. Like, why did you rely on a platform for the controlling of the data and your audience?
So do you think we'll see brands or individuals move away from the reliance on social media for fear that maybe they'll say the wrong thing and get silenced for the rest of their brand's life?
I think it's a bit dramatic to say that.
Yeah.
But I would have been making the argument. I mean, I did make the argument with my clients forever. Let's just build that out on Facebook. And my answer was, I would build that out on a microsite and use Facebook as a mechanism.
Right.
So the strategic way to look at this from a social media side is the hub and spoke model. So we can use mine because I know mine. So let's use my ecosystem was, I've got my blog, which housed the blog and the podcast. You could sign up and be notified when stuff is published. And then I had my Facebook page, my LinkedIn profile, and then I'm publishing on Medium. I had all these spokes.
Yeah.
And that would have been the proper model that I would have thought my clients could use well.
Yeah.
What I think the evolution of content marketing and subsequently social media happened is you needed to build what I called a hub and hub model. No more spokes.
Yeah.
So I'm doing my blog and podcast. I have newsletters and all this stuff. What I'm doing on Facebook is a little bit different. It's not the same stuff. I'm not just saying, hey, go to my blog and check out my article, which a lot of people did for a long time. Yeah. I'll still do that. But again, if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or Medium, it's a different experience than if you just go to sixpixels.com or mitchjoel.com or whatever it is. Yeah. So I think that the answer to the question is I would like to see more hub and hub models, but I don't want to see them at the sacrifice of the main one, which is the ownable asset, the ownable, people talked about, do you own the land or are you renting it?
Yeah.
So the Trump model was flawed because it was all based on rented property.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is ironic because he's a real estate guy. But anyways, but that is the way we have to think. Now, in a world like this, in a world of Snapchat, in a world of TikTok, an argument could be made that brands need to be more transferable.
Yeah.
That if that they should only be on TikTok, and that if it doesn't work, well, then they just move on to what does work, right? It's like, it's not working for us on TikTok, so we'll just go to Instagram or YouTube.
Yeah.
There is a good argument for that, and I wouldn't deny it, but understand that if you're trying to build an actual base and one that you want to communicate and transact with long term, you need to find a way to acquire them differently. And you see this, by the way, in the biggest YouTubers and streamers. They're starting other channels to get people to be more directly engaged so that they know who they are. They're not just reliant if YouTube decides to kill a video or boot them out or whatever. So you're seeing this play out in live in real time every single day because it's evolving and changing.
Wow, that's fascinating. I think we seem to be in a transition time. I mean, in society at large, but certainly kind of in this world of social media right now, which is quite fascinating to see. If I were to ask you, what is one commonly held belief or practice in the world of digital marketing or social media more specifically that you think or that you passionately disagree with or would like to see changed? What would that be?
I'm not a fan of retargeting blindly.
Okay. Can you explain what retargeting is?
Yeah, so retargeting would be I go and check out a book and I don't buy it or do anything, or maybe I do buy it. And the next thing I know, all I'm seeing are ads for that book and other books, or that place that I visited, that site that I visited. Many of us have had that. You know, I don't know how my wife and our accounts must be connected. She'll talk about something like, maybe we should try like good food. And the next day, like, all I'm seeing is food service ads in my Facebook feed. I'm like, either it's listening or I don't know what's going on here. Our accounts must be connected somewhere. It's a weird thing.
Yeah.
Now, normally I would think this is an amazing tool to retarget, but my challenge with it is it's done blindly.
Right.
It's like, if you didn't buy, we're just going to send you these links and inundate you. So the example that I give is, I'm a big fan of the brand Toomey, and back when I could travel, I have a specific bag that I really like, and I talk about it a lot. And people will often say on social media, hey, what is the bag? And so I'll quickly hop over to Toomey.com. I'm pointing up here because I have another monitor, and I would paste the link in somewhere. And the next thing I know, all I'm seeing are these ads for this bag to buy it, and they're giving me deals. I'm already a customer. I already have it. I feel like that's terrible on many levels. Level one is it's a wasted impression for Toomey.
Yeah.
Two is I'm already a customer and it's making me not like you.
Yeah.
Three is I'm now telling other people like you and your entire class about it. Four is that there's so many layers that don't make it well. Now, on the other side, one of my favorite people who does this really well is Scott Devine. Scott has the largest online community for bass teaching. It's called Scott's Bass Lessons.
Yes.
SBL. And Scott and I become friends over the past little while. He's a great guy. But if you go to his site or check out something related to him or search for bass lessons, electro bass, whatever it might be, his retargeting is just awesome content. You know, it'll be like it'll be a video for like the 5 times Billy Sheehan went beast mode.
Yeah.
Or it'll be an interview with so-and-so. And I always click on the content. I'm like, that's great content. And he's retargeting me. It's all retargeting technology.
Yeah.
He's just not doing it with an ad or what I dropped. He's doing it with things that might make me like him more.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So I gave you the worst part of it, but the way to work it.
That for me is a really relatable example because I follow him on Instagram and Facebook and I see his content. I love it. I love to see, the 2-minute thing with, him watching whoever Palladino play some bass line and he kind of imitates it and we're all excited about it. And I think
it's great content. That might drive you to sign up for a masterclass or to buy a T-shirt or to take the full on, the player's path, the full on course.
Yeah.
But the ones, people are so lazy with their retargeting. It's brutal to watch. And I see it every day. And, the truth is it makes my actual experience, that's called Facebook, it makes my Facebook experience worse.
Yeah.
Because I actually want to see relevant ads. I want to see cool things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great comment. It's like a lot of people don't like ads because the ads they're seeing aren't the right ads. If you actually saw the right ads, you would actually maybe appreciate them.
Yeah, the simpler way I say it is people, I hate advertising. No, you hate crappy advertising. You love great advertising. There's a movie you want to see or a concert you want to see or a product you've been hoping. I mean, we love it. Like, I'm all in. Like, show me great stuff. I want to see great stuff.
Tell me where to spend my money.
Yeah, please.
All right. I just want to end with one question. So kind of the same question. What is one thing that you see in the industry that you love and that people should do more of?
I've always been a big fan of being intimate with your marketing. So, for years, people were saying email is dead, and I never prescribed to that. And if anything, what we're seeing in the past couple of years is a massive return to email and having these intimate conversations. I think blogs are great and posting on social media is great, but to get a weekly newsletter from somebody that I've subscribed to and have it be content I haven't seen and know that they've spent a couple of hours or a week really thinking about that. There's something powerful about that. So I love that. And I also love, I always say that I love YouTube. I think YouTube is such a great place to tell really compelling stories. And we're seeing the extension of that now with streamers and real creators and YouTubers. But even for brands, my viewing habits really are that when I normally go into bed when I watch an hour or two of this stuff at night. And it'll be with my laptop and I will go on YouTube to my subscriptions and I will just look at them from newest to oldest and just open up a billion tabs and have a potpourri of content from news to music to comic books it's basically the most hyper niche content, but the creators that are good at it are really compelling because the technology that we have to do this has really evolved in the past couple of years.
I love your comment about potpourri. That's great.
It's what it is. It's almost like I'm always like, I hope I don't get hit by a car because if they see my playlist, they're going to be it's a lot of embarrassing stuff on there. I just have a cheesy taste in a lot of things, and to a certain degree, YouTube is the greatest expression of that for me.
Yeah, you could look at someone's YouTube history and know exactly who they are as an individual.
Totally. Yeah. Or their children.
Yes. Or their children. That's great, Mitch. Well, I really appreciate you spending time with me here today. This is a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure all of the students that will watch this will as well. Thanks so much for being with me.
Well, thank you, Jared. I appreciate you trying to reach out and find me, and thank you for doing it.
Great. Thanks so much.